pieces.
Hi, my name is Xavier Perry Art. I'm an artist with the Desire Company, and today we're going to show you how to paint your tabletop. So far, we have a light sketch underneath. We have a white coat of gesso to make our spray paint colors pop, and we're going to add spray paint, masking tape, and a Sharpie to create our stencils to fill in our table. So once you have your sketch done, your white covering coated, then we'll be ready to go. So for our first step, I already have my sketch down, but it kind of got faded away a little bit because of my white layer. So I'm gonna enforce it just a little bit with the Sharpie, and then I'm gonna go ahead and start taping some of my shapes out, and I'll show you how that looks. So the ideal here is to enforce my underdrawing using my Sharpie, and I plan to, in certain areas, lay down my masking tape and create a stencil using the masking tape, my green frog tape, and then cut those shapes out with my X-Acto knife. I really like using the Sharpie because it's very opaque and you can see your design through the tape fairly easily if you lay down enough Sharpie marks. We're just laying down where we want our pattern to be for our popcorn in order to cut our shapes out. So take as much time as you need. If you need to pause the video for a second to catch up, if I'm drawing a little bit too fast, definitely pause the video. I just want to get some cool lines down to create our popcorn shape. And it can be really playful. Doesn't have to be anything too serious, it's just popcorn. All right, that's about it. Let's see, I'll do a couple more marks on the edge. Oh, let's not forget our popcorn at the bottom. So now what we pretty much have done is trace or go over our underneath sketch. So then that way we can see it a little bit better, because sometimes your white coating will be a little bit too opaque because it is spray paint, and you need to see your design when you're masking it off. So the next step here will be to add our green frog tape. And we're gonna pretty much use our tape as a protective layer, and we're gonna keep the areas that we don't want to get painted by covering them with the green frog tape. If there's any excess tape in areas where we do want to paint, we're gonna use our X-Acto knife and cut those shapes out and create stencils. Rip a clean line off. And now I'm going to stretch my frog tape all the way across. And you'll use quite a bit of this today, and you'll become taping pros. I'm gonna lay it across the top of my popcorn bucket because I want to keep my curvy lines here. And it looks like I'm gonna need one more strip. So I'll tear off a long piece. Don't be afraid to use it if you need it, because once you spray an area, you have to let the spray paint dry before you can move on and correct your problem area. So it's best to just use as much tape as you need so you can keep flowing with things. So now I'm picking up my X-Acto knife, and I'm going to pretty much outline the design or the parts that I want to keep. And that will be the outline of the bucket. Let's see. Take your time to figure out exactly where you want to cut it. All right, I think I'm feeling pretty good, and I'm gonna start my cuts here. And I'm just working on tracing my design with my X-Acto knife. And since we use the Sharpie, we can see clearly through the tape because the Sharpie is very opaque. And I'm just taking my time with it. You want to be as confident as possible with your mark making while using your X-Acto knife to get the smoothest lines possible. So take your time if needed. If you need to pause the video, then that's okay. Make sure you trim it all the way off the edge of the table to fully cut through your tape. And let's peel this out now. Now what we have created is a stencil. I'll raise it up for you. So I'll have my 2 pieces of tape going across my design. And slowly peel it out. Let's see what we have. As you can see, we have these nice arches. And since it's 2 layers of tape, I'm gonna use my X-Acto knife to kind of pick at the tape layer that I want to come up. There we go. Some more of our arches kind of hiding in there. Take your time with this part to make sure you don't leave any of your design still in, taped down, because once you fill it in with the spray paint, you'll have to wait till the spray paint fully dries before you can correct your mistake. So take your time with it. So we have our arches on our popcorn bucket. Put our tape to the side. You can kind of roll these edges over if they're kind of sticking out at you. And the next step I want to do is, let's get another piece of tape up top just to make sure when we're spraying, maybe 2 pieces, and bring it up here to about, a little bit more in your design to make sure we don't spray any colors that we don't want in our popcorn area. And we're going to create our stripes for our popcorn bucket. So we have red and white spray paint by Montana and Montana Gold and Black. And let's get those taped down. So once again, I'm gonna use my green frog tape to mask off the areas that I do want to keep. Keep as in the areas that I want to protect from being sprayed. And the areas that I want spray paint to fall in, leave those exposed. Get a nice piece running. Like I said, use as much as possible because you want to make sure that you don't spray the wrong area and have to come back later because it's gonna slow your project down. All right, some nice run tape. And we're gonna do this all the way across our tabletop here until we cover the layers that we want to keep. So we'll run another piece this way. So we have nice, clean, sharp lines. And I'm going to apply this process all the way down. And on the opposite side, my tape is starting to go over the area that I taped off first. So we're gonna fold that over to reopen the area that we want to be exposed. And so as you can see, my area in the middle is kind of rough. You have these edges standing up, pieces of tape standing up, but the area that I do want to spray, this side here, the side of the bucket here, is very clean and we have a nice arch. And so I just want to repeat this clean line going up and this clean arching line going across the top, all the way across the tabletop. So feel free to take as much time as you need. And I'll just work my way through the rest of the table. All right, so now that we have our popcorn bucket masked off with our green fog tape, our next step is to fill in the shapes that we want red with our red Montana spray paint. And we're gonna also be using our Montana spray paint caps. They come in a variety of colors. For this, we'll need just a standard gold cap that comes with the spray paint itself. And I'll show you how that looks. The first thing you wanna do with your Montana spray paint is to make sure that it's shaped well. You can hear the little ball on the inside clicking around. That's a good sign. If you don't hear the ball, you wanna just keep shaking it because sometimes the ball will get stuck in there with the pigment of the paint. And you just wanna give it a nice shake. Let's say for about 10, 15 seconds. All right, that sounds pretty good. And you wanna add your Montana spray cap to the can. Be sure not to have the opening of the spray cap facing towards you while pressing your cap down, or you will definitely spray yourself. Kind of stand to the side and give it a nice squeeze. Our cap is on there and it's spraying out nicely. For this step, you will need your spray paint mask, and it is a great idea to also use your goggles. So take a second to grab those and we'll get our shapes filled in. So the technique here is to spray in an up and down motion and a side to side motion to fill in your shapes. And as long as you have that down pat, you can keep going to fill in the rest of your popcorn lines. All right, we have our red filled in. What we'll do is we'll allow this to dry. But for the meantime, what I would like to do is try to fill in some of our popcorn area here at the top. So I'm gonna remove a little bit of our masking tape, not too much because I don't wanna rush it and risk getting some of my yellow inside of my red. We'll try to fill in as much of the popcorn as possible. I think it's pretty safe to take the top line off too. And if you have a piece that's kind of randomly hanging out there, you can always use your X-Acto knife, which is perfect for any cutting project, and gently run it across any excess pieces of tape that might be a problem for you. So I'm gonna lay it down for a second here. Be mindful that your red is still wet. Allow it time to dry. And I'm gonna load my second can, which is the yellow, Vanilla by Montana Gold. I'm gonna make sure that the cap is not facing me or my eyes, in a safe position. Kind of give that a nice press. I got a little dust in my red, a little sawdust in my red, but that's okay. You can always come back and go over it. So if anything lands on it while you're outside, like dust, you can always come back and go over it. All right, so now that I have some of my popcorn yellow in here, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna allow this to kind of dry a little bit more before I move forward and take off my tape to do the bottom parts of the yellow where the bucket and the popcorn meet. But I wanna give it proper drying time to make sure that I'm not messing anything up. And like I said, feel free to pause the video if you need to and take a second. So now that our table is dry, you wanna give it a nice little tap to make sure it's dry in all areas. And make sure that it's dry before you apply any more tape or remove tape or any more paint, because you wanna make sure you're not undoing the work that you just applied to your project. So it looks pretty dry. Our first step will be to start to slowly removing some of this tape and figuring out where we need to add more paint and where we need to finish our design. So I'm going to start on this end, and we'll just start removing the tape that is right underneath our popcorn line, because we are going to add a little bit more yellow for the spaces that were too hard to reach. And if all of it is starting to come off, the best way to control this is to use your X-Acto knife and make some small incisions and cut across the tape, so then that way you can control the removal of your tape. And you can get some nice clean lines if you just take your time and you make sure that your paint is fully dry and you go slow. We also have our popcorn piece on the corner. Let's go ahead and remove that as well. And as you can see in the arching area, my tape is sticking in more than one area again. I'm going to use my X-Acto knife. Be mindful of the size of your table so that way you don't drop your piece off while you're trying to hold it and remove tape at the same time. Just be mindful of where your workspace is. And there we go. We have some really clean, nice bucket lines. There's a couple areas here, if you can see, where the red spray paint came underneath the paint. And we can touch that up with some white paint. But for the most part, it looks really good. The next step we want to do is to mask the areas that we want to keep, our red and our white. So then that way we can go and fill in our popcorn yellow and our popcorn yellow at the bottom. So same technique as earlier. You want to get a nice run, a nice piece of tape, and you want to cover up the areas that you want to protect, so that way you can remove the areas that you would like to fill in. All right, that looks really good. So I'm going to also tape the bottom so I can keep my popcorn piece down below. And make sure you're using as much tape as you need, because the last thing you want to do is spray yellow in an area that you want to keep. And we're going to take our X-Acto knife, and what we're going to do is, once again, cut out the shapes that we want to keep, so our popcorn piece below. And then we're going to take our X-Acto knife and kind of retrace our arches here all the way across, so then that way we can see our white empty spaces in between and fill those in with yellow. So now it looks like we have everything cut out, and same thing, I'm going to use my X-Acto knife. I'm going to slowly remove the areas that I want to remove and leave down the tape areas that I want to keep protected. All right, so now that we have our design cut out, we have our popcorn free here down at the bottom. We were able to tape it, use our X-Acto knife, and kind of mask it off. And then we were able to remove our tape at the top, so that way we can see the empty white spaces that still need to be filled in with our popcorn vanilla color. And then we also were able to keep our masking green frog tape down in order to protect the layers that we just painted, our red and white stripes, and to keep them white. So our next step is to put on our safety goggles and face mask on one more time. And we're gonna quickly hit those spots for the popcorn at the top and at the bottom. We're gonna allow that to dry. I really like how that looks. Now that we have filled in the bottom of our popcorn, once we remove our tape later on, you'll see that the color goes down to the bottom of our bucket, and we'll be able to see that the line seamless and our popcorn color will be touching the bucket itself. And then also we have our little popcorn down at the bottom that will be just hanging out at the bottom by itself, and he's filled in really nicely as well. So now that our paint is dry, what we want to do is remove our last layer of tape. But just before that, we're gonna just tap it with our finger just a little bit to make sure that it is fully dry before removing the tape, because we don't want to chip away at the paint that we have already applied. It feels dry. So our first step is to remove the tape. So now that our coffee table is complete, you can add more detail, you can add your own flavor to it, as much as you want to personalize your coffee table to your liking. And you can also add your legs to the bottom. So for my design, I'm going to use the matte black hairpin coffee table legs. Feel free to use whatever legs that you like. Thanks for following along with me on how to paint a coffee table. I can't wait to see what you guys do, and have fun.